Today, we have with us Bradley Staats, Professor of Operations Management at the University of North Carolina. Brad, thank you very much for being with us.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
So I want to focus on your super interesting work on learning.
Okay.
One of the things that you have identified in your work is that in order to foster learning, we need to be able to learn from failure.
Yep.
However, at the same time, you have identified that it's really hard for organizations to do that. Yep. So I guess my question is, what is it that organizations can do in order to foster environments in which employees can learn from failure while thriving in doing that?
Yeah, it's a great question, Rocio. Thanks for asking it. I mean, we take it for granted that you've got to try stuff. It's going to go wrong sometimes, and so whoever tries the most stuff wins. But unfortunately, all too often, both ourselves and our organizations kind of grind that risk taking out of us. And so I'd suggest a few steps that leaders can take to help encourage learning from failure. The first has to do with destigmatizing failure, and that's really about helping people understand that it's not a flaw in the process. It's a regular part of the process. That the only way to avoid ever making a mistake is just to do the same thing over and over again. And we know that's not going to set us up to be able to learn and improve. So, we begin by helping people realize that it's going to happen. That often means sharing our own examples as a leader. And then also creating some guardrails. Where is it that it's safe for me to fail here, right? And so you can think about if you're in an extreme industry, if you're in, kind of the nuclear industry in the nuclear control room, you don't get to play around with the knobs and the dials and see what happens, right? You're going to do offline failure. If you're, in marketing, then you're going to run some tests, and so there's going to be A/B tests, and sometimes things won't work, but kind of what sort of cost is acceptable. So really destigmatizing is number one. I think two is appreciating that with failure, we react really strongly to it initially. And that's part of the problem. We get kind of that shock to it, that we never move past that to kind of get to the explain and the adapt steps. Kind of what happened and how can I do better? So as a leader, we can really focus people on that explain step. We can get people to ask themselves the question of, hey, what can I learn here? What did I do wrong? How do I benefit from this? We also can get people kind of beforehand to try to sketch out, well, what should happen? Because that way when things go wrong, you don't explain it away with, oh, well, I really meant that, or, oh, no, this secondary measure is important. Instead, it's, hey, we have a disconnect here. Let's close the gap. I think related to that, though, also, is at times we maybe need to give people a failure target. There have been companies who put kind of innovative, initiatives out, and what they found, there was kind of a store of the future effort at one retailer that they didn't fail enough because people were so afraid of this. So they changed it and said, hey, you have a failure rate now. If you're not failing kind of honestly often enough, then we're not going to accept this, right? And so that really encouraged it, and then they learned from it. I think the third piece is helping people appreciate the role of data. Data is kind of the great equalizer. There's a great quote from former CEO of a tech company who said, if we have data, let's use data. If all we have are opinions, let's go with mine. And so we want to reorient, right? To, hey, what do we see in the data? How do we learn from that? And again, the fact that it's a shortfall, that just means we need to do better. I think as we bring it back to people, what you sometimes discover is, hey, they knew something I didn't know, right? The data, actually had a gap in it, but other times they didn't know, right? And so which one is it? Either way, when you take that data, you jump into it, you get to have a different kind of discussion that's fact-based, not opinion. Failure really is the F word of most organizations, but it's central to our learning story. And so at least with those three steps, I think we can make some progress in our learning journey.
Wow, this is really fascinating. Brad, thank you so much. And here we go, a very interesting and fresh perspective and a very different way of considering failure. I really love your aspect about destigmatizing, so thank you very much.
Awesome, thanks.